Okay, tonight, we travel a mist-shrouded stretch of Virginia, where the forest's quiet was broken not by screams, but by vanished lives. Along Colonial Parkway, couples disappeared into the night, leaving only silence. In the 1980s, small-town charm hid shadows no one could explain. What seemed serene concealed danger, turning ordinary moments of love and intimacy into fleeting, vulnerable, and ultimately tragic encounters. Welcome to Criminal Mindcast, where true crime is told not just through events, but through silence and the weight of what remains unsaid. Unsolved cases linger like ghosts, each detail a fragment of mystery, each absence a question. We explore crimes, the minds behind them, and their echoes on families and communities. Tonight we examine the Colonial Parkway murders, young couples, in love and unaware, disappearing along a quiet road, leaving behind confusion, fear, and unanswered questions. We will trace the victims, investigate the suspect profiles, examine the eerie details of each disappearance, and analyze the psychological patterns that may finally bring clarity to this enduring mystery. The Colonial Parkway murders did not occur in isolation. They unfolded within ordinary lives, where unsuspecting young couples, college students, recent graduates, or young adults sought private moments of connection and freedom. Lovers shared laughter, whispered conversations, and tender intimacy in parked cars along secluded trails, trusting the serene forested parkway. Each embodied promise, warmth, and vulnerability, yet their sudden disappearances shattered families and communities alike. The tranquil landscape that once offered safety became a stage for unseen menace, eroding the sense of security in towns long untouched by violence, leaving fear and uncertainty in its wake. Psychologically, these victims shared common traits: openness, attentiveness, and trust. Their innocence, normally a source of strength and joy, inadvertently made them visible to a predator skilled in reading human behavior. Their routines, driving late at night, pausing in secluded spots, relying on familiar locations, rendered them predictable in ways the killer could exploit. Friends and social circles, unable to foresee such malevolence, were blindsided by the sudden absence of those they cared about. Each vanishing underscores the terrifying efficiency of a perpetrator who operated methodically, leaving minimal traces while maintaining anonymity, and whose motives remain elusive even decades later. The suspected killer embodies a subtle, hidden menace within ordinary community life. Likely familiar with the parkway and surrounding areas, they navigated the environment with ease. Early trauma, neglect, or familial instability may have fostered undetected antisocial tendencies. Their behavior shows careful planning, patience, and the ability to blend seamlessly into society, concealing predatory intent. Traits of psychopathy, superficial charm, lack of empathy, and manipulativeness align with the profile, alongside deeper psychological complexities shaped by unresolved internal conflicts and early instability. What makes small-town murders particularly chilling is the close-knit nature of the community, where everyone knows someone and news spreads rapidly. In the Colonial Parkway cases, fear reverberated through families, friends, and neighbors, turning familiar streets into sources of anxiety. Ordinary activities, drives, walks, weekend outings, became tense, overshadowed by the knowledge of an unseen predator. Unlike urban crimes, the lack of anonymity magnified the terror. The killer's ability to operate undetected required cunning, deep social insight, and a precise understanding of human behavior to evade suspicion and exploit trust. Family narratives provide additional texture to the tragedy. Parents describe children as joyful, attentive, and occasionally adventurous, qualities that tragically made them vulnerable. Siblings recall starlit drives and intimate conversations, moments that in hindsight became the last known glimpses of their loved ones. These memories highlight the universality of human intimacy and the fragility of safety, underscoring how ordinary expressions of connection can be preyed upon. For the suspect, observing such interactions may have formed part of an internal calculus, where normal expressions of affection were interpreted through the lens of opportunity or compulsion, converting love and vulnerability into triggers for violence. This intersection of warmth and predation is a defining characteristic of the Colonial Parkway narrative, creating tension that is both psychological and existential. The murders cast a broader shadow across Virginia's college towns and suburban regions. Late-night drives, once emblematic of freedom and youth, became laden with fear. Couples reconsidered secluded spots previously taken for granted. Community events, once carefree, acquired a new undercurrent of vigilance and caution. The murders demonstrate how trauma propagates through social consciousness, extending beyond immediate victims to shape communal behaviors. In effect, the perpetrator weaponized fear itself, leaving communities suspended in heightened alert, with anxiety persisting long after each disappearance. Examining the killer's potential background invites consideration of hidden trauma, rigid internalized moral frameworks, and prolonged exposure to domestic dysfunction. Such factors can foster emotional dysregulation and distort perceptions of intimacy, creating fertile ground for antisocial behavior. Historical criminology suggests that many serial offenders begin with internalized conflict, which manifests outwardly under specific conditions, often tied to control, power, or unresolved anger. Within this framework, the Colonial Parkway suspect may have been ordinary in appearance and social integration, while harboring impulses that escalated in private, blending seamlessly into community life. Victim selection offers deep psychological insight. By targeting couples, the killer symbolically attacked trust, intimacy, and perceived vulnerability. This deliberate choice heightens the terror, showing that the violence was calculated, not random. Each abduction reflects careful planning, understanding of relational dynamics, and cognitive sophistication. The perpetrator's detached analytical approach, observing behaviors, environments, and social patterns, reveals that the murders expose not just outward violence, but the internal workings of a mind focused on control, observation, and subtle manipulation. The killer's methodical nature extends to the handling of crime scenes and evidence. Vehicles were abandoned strategically, personal items left untouched, and minimal traces remained for investigators to collect. Such deliberate choices suggest both forensic awareness and psychological gratification derived from manipulation, observation, and the creation of ambiguity. The offender's understanding of human behavior is evident in the use of isolation, timing, and the calculated deployment of uncertainty, which transforms ordinary settings into stages of fear without overtly violent spectacle. The interplay between normalcy and menace lies at the heart of these crimes. The Colonial Parkway murders illuminate the ways in which ordinary life can be penetrated by extraordinary danger. The victim's innocence, the comfort of community, and the illusion of privacy were weaponized against them. The predator operated with a dual consciousness, navigating society with superficial integration while pursuing an internal agenda of observation, control, and ultimately, erasure. The resulting tension between what is seen and what is missing, between human connection and predation, is the haunting essence of the case. Finally, the murders highlight the enduring complexity of understanding human behavior in the context of crime. The victim's ordinary traits, trust, affection, openness, interacted with the offender's extraordinary traits, calculated detachment, observational precision, and hidden compulsion. This interaction created a dynamic in which ordinary moments became vulnerable, and ordinary spaces became arenas of fear. The Colonial Parkway murders, in their methodology, psychological implications, and societal impact, exemplify how predatory behavior can coexist, unnoticed within close communities, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of life long after the events themselves. The Colonial Parkway murders were not isolated events, but a series of eerie disappearances spanning nearly a decade, each leaving fragments of story, faint clues, and unanswered questions. The first case, in August 1986, involved a young couple enjoying a summer evening drive. Perhaps pausing to watch the James River sunset, they were enveloped by quiet forests, a seemingly serene setting that became the stage for terror, where fate, or a hidden intent, waited unseen. Witnesses later reported seeing their vehicle parked at a secluded pull-off, lights dimmed and music low, a scene that suggested nothing unusual. Hours passed without incident. By morning, the car remained untouched, keys still in the ignition, belongings left behind. Yet the couple had vanished. No struggle, no footprints leading into the surrounding woods, and no trace of the victims themselves emerged. This pattern, ordinary moments abruptly interrupted, would repeat, leaving behind abandoned vehicles and personal items while providing investigators no immediate leads. 2 years later, another couple disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Known for their energy and laughter, they were last seen sharing a quiet night together in the glow of their car's interior. Hours later, their vehicle was found abandoned along a curved stretch of the parkway, doors locked, belongings untouched, tire tracks suggesting only a brief pause. Investigators could reconstruct no path beyond the immediate scene, leaving friends and families to grapple with a disappearance that defied explanation. A disturbing pattern emerged. Vehicles were abandoned at secluded pull-offs, personal items left untouched, and in some cases, cars were left running as if the occupants planned to return. No signs of struggle or defense were found. This meticulous behavior suggested a patient, precise perpetrator, aware of forensic limits, and skilled at manipulating the scene to confuse and intimidate. By 1989, the disappearances had coalesced into a disturbing pattern. Each incident involved a couple engaged in familiar rituals, evening drives, private moments, and sudden vanishing. One particularly chilling account came from a local resident who observed a couple appearing agitated, as if aware of being watched. A figure, moving unnaturally through the tree line, vanished when attention turned. Law enforcement catalogued the report, yet no corroborating evidence was found, leaving the encounter unexplained. These moments hint at a predator capable of studying, stalking, and striking with calculated patience, combining knowledge of human behavior with stealth and spatial awareness. Odd behaviors extended beyond the victims themselves. Residents sometimes reported vehicles moving slowly along the parkway at night, lights flickering, occupants appearing to scan their surroundings with unusual intent. Others heard faint, dissonant sounds, engines, footsteps on gravel, rustling branches, without seeing anyone present. While some dismissed these accounts, together they created an atmosphere of pervasive unease. The parkway, once a route of leisure, became a landscape of tension requiring constant vigilance. Adding to the strangeness, personal items were found in inexplicable ways. A purse suspended in a tree, a car radio left playing at full volume. These deliberate acts suggested manipulation, exploiting the symbolic power of absence to instill fear without overt violence. Subtle deviations appeared as cases accumulated. Though the parkway's geography remained constant, winding roads, dense forests, isolated pull-offs, victim behaviors varied slightly. Some left notes, others parked hurriedly to retrieve items or answer calls. The killer adapted, demonstrating cognitive flexibility, the ability to respond to unexpected circumstances, and a tactical awareness that complicated prediction or interception. Such adaptability underscores the sophistication behind seemingly spontaneous acts. One twist continues to haunt investigators. In 1987, among scattered belongings of a missing couple, authorities discovered a single shoe deliberately positioned on a roadside embankment. Forensic analysis could not determine its owner, nor the path taken by the victim. Its placement suggested intentionality, a message, a signature, or misdirection. Decades of investigation have yet to explain this anomaly. The shoe has become emblematic of the broader mystery, tangible evidence hinting at a narrative yet refusing to provide closure. The timing of the murders raises questions about the killer's motives. Incidents were irregular, with months or years between them, suggesting episodic compulsion influenced by stress, emotion, or opportunity. Such cooling-off periods, common in serial offenders, concealed ongoing intent, complicating profiling and masking the continuous underlying pattern of predation for investigators. The victim's final movements reveal consistent vulnerability. Couples were typically engaged in intimacy, conversation, shared music, gentle touch. These ordinary acts became psychological openings exploited by the offender. The contrast between tenderness and violence illustrates the calculated targeting of openness, turning private connection into exposure. The murders attack not only physical safety, but the human capacity for trust, intimacy, and care. Vehicle and property handling further reflect methodical behavior. Cars were rarely tampered with, doors often locked, belongings left undisturbed, occasionally arranged in ways that confounded investigators. This precision indicates premeditation and a psychological satisfaction derived from creating confusion and uncertainty. The killer's signature, absence rather than destruction, subtle manipulation rather than chaos, reveals deep understanding of perception and investigative methodology. The geographic pattern of the Colonial Parkway murders reveals the predator's calculated sophistication. Disappearances occurred in areas offering both seclusion and observation, pull-offs, bridges, and forest edges, allowing the offender to select victims, watch them, and vanish without trace. This spatial awareness suggests repeated study and intimate knowledge of the terrain, making the environment itself a silent accomplice. Combined with abandoned vehicles, scattered belongings, and inexplicable objects, the timeline depicts a predator of patience, precision, and psychological insight. Unresolved clues like the mysterious shoe ensure the case remains cold, haunting investigators and the public alike. Viewed holistically, the Colonial Parkway murders are not merely a series of unsolved crimes. They are a study in human vulnerability, the interplay of opportunity and intent, and the psychological architecture of a predator hidden in plain sight. The timeline reads as a ledger of absence, calculated disappearances leaving silence and unanswered questions. Each anomaly, each object, each abandoned car testifies to a perpetrator, attuned to human behavior, forensic limitations, and the subtle art of evasion. The investigation into the Colonial Parkway murders began with urgency, yet it quickly became a study in frustration, procedural ambiguity, and the limitations of 1980s forensic capability. Law enforcement initially approached each disappearance as an isolated incident, unaware of the broader emergent pattern connecting multiple cases over several years. Local police documented abandoned vehicles, collected whatever evidence was available, and conducted interviews with friends, families, and occasional eyewitnesses, but the scope of investigative tools at the time severely restricted their ability to detect subtle clues. Items that might have been significant, smudged fingerprints, footprints obscured by gravel or leaves, fibers, were often overlooked. Without modern DNA analysis, investigators could not connect disparate elements, leaving gaps that would haunt the cases for decades. Officers relied on routine procedures, yet the unusual nature of these disappearances required creativity, psychological insight, and geographic profiling that were not fully utilized. Evidence with the potential to link cases, such as abandoned vehicles, locked doors with keys inside, or carefully arranged personal items, was often dismissed as coincidental or insignificant. This oversight, understandable given the forensic limitations, contributed to stagnation in the investigative process and heightened frustration among law enforcement. As the cases accumulated, public interest and media attention intensified. National coverage highlighted the vulnerability of young couples and the apparent randomness of the abductions, generating fear and fascination in equal measure. Newspapers published dramatic headlines, and television broadcasts combined factual reporting with speculation, amplifying the perception of danger. While media attention brought awareness, it also complicated the investigation. Witnesses sometimes embellished or misremembered events, rumors spread quickly, and the public demanded rapid results despite the paucity of concrete evidence. Investigators were forced to navigate the tension between public perception and the realities of a complex, incomplete case. The investigation was further hindered by conflicting theories among law enforcement. Some believed the crimes were opportunistic assaults by a transient who struck and vanished before raising suspicion. Others argued for a local resident, someone deeply familiar with the parkway and community routines. These opposing views fractured the focus of the inquiry, dispersing resources across competing leads and inadvertently allowing the perpetrator to adapt, exploit uncertainty, and continue operating without detection. Public response mirrored the tension between fascination and fear. Communities along the parkway became hyper-vigilant, scrutinizing strangers, parked vehicles, and anyone lingering after dark. Couples altered routines, friends traveled together, and tips to law enforcement surged, many unsubstantiated or misdirected. This heightened scrutiny created a feedback loop in which normal behavior was constantly monitored for signs of criminality, amplifying anxiety across the region. Media narratives reinforced this atmosphere, emphasizing the unseen threat while portraying the victims as innocent, further deepening the community's unease. One of the greatest challenges of the Colonial Parkway investigation was the scarcity of forensic evidence. Unlike conventional crime scenes, these disappearances left few tangible traces. No recovered bodies, little sign of struggle, and only scattered, often conflicting eyewitness accounts. Investigators were forced to depend on circumstantial details, vehicle placement, timing, and behavioral patterns. Geographic profiling suggested the killer selected sites combining privacy with observation points. Yet without corroboration, such theories remained speculative. Media attention complicated matters further. Reports emphasized abandoned cars and oddly placed personal belongings, portraying them as sinister signatures. Local anecdotes sometimes supported investigative theories, but just as often contradicted them. Sensational coverage sustained public fear and scrutiny, yet hampered progress by generating overwhelming volumes of rumors and false leads. The demand for resolution collided with the harsh reality of scarce, elusive evidence. Police theories continued to evolve. One hypothesis suggested a single offender was responsible for all cases, exhibiting behavioral consistency, cognitive control, patience, and adaptability. Another posited multiple perpetrators, independently acting yet displaying similar predatory tendencies. Each approach influenced investigative strategy differently. A single offender model encouraged concentrated surveillance and profiling, whereas a multiple offender theory required broader canvassing. The tension between these models illustrates the difficulty of constructing a coherent understanding from incomplete and ambiguous data. Eyewitness accounts, although limited and often inconsistent, offered glimpses into the perpetrator's behavior. Residents reported unusual vehicle activity, shadows moving with purpose, or figures near wooded areas. These fragmentary observations suggested a deliberate, calculated presence. Repeated behavioral elements, vehicles strategically positioned, personal items left undisturbed, minimal physical evidence, hinted at a methodical approach central to later behavioral profiling, but frequently underemphasized during initial investigations. Handling of reported sightings presented further challenges. Calls describing suspicious activity were often logged, but could not be verified. Individuals reported seeing figures near vehicles or glimpses of someone vanishing into the forest. While unconfirmed, these reports provided indirect insights into the offender's patterns, comfort with observation, ability to avoid detection, and awareness of human perception. Retrospectively, these fragmented accounts contribute to a behavioral mosaic, revealing a mind meticulously attuned to its environment. Despite limitations, investigators attempted to synthesize available data. Geographic and temporal analyses examined intervals between disappearances and spatial patterns of vehicle locations. Although patterns emerged, the absence of bodies and direct evidence constrained conclusions. The investigative landscape became a web of possibilities, intersecting at points of uncertainty. Behavioral analysis suggested a methodical, adaptive offender. Social context revealed community fear, amplified by media attention. Forensic inquiry offered tantalizing but incomplete clues. Together, these elements formed a complex labyrinthine case, where each clue invited multiple interpretations. Public reaction deepened the Colonial Parkway narrative as community meetings, anecdotal reports, and relentless media coverage fueled widespread unease. Neighborhoods organized informal surveillance, parents cautioned children, and late-night drives became shadowed by dread. The parkway shifted from a place of leisure to a psychological zone of menace. This convergence of public perception, investigative shortfalls, and media influence revealed how unsolved crimes reverberate far beyond their victims, reshaping collective behavior. The investigation highlights the difficulty law enforcement faces when confronting an adaptive offender skilled at manipulation and evasion. Overlooked evidence, competing theories, and intense scrutiny allowed the killer to exploit ambiguity. Abandoned vehicles, misplaced belongings, and fleeting sightings underscore how silence and absence can be as haunting as physical evidence itself. To understand the Colonial Parkway murders is to enter a psychological terrain both calculated and fractured. The perpetrator displayed traits consistent with persistent antisocial tendencies, yet their intelligence, patience, and meticulous attention to detail suggest far more than impulsive violence. Instead, we see a cold detachment, an ability to observe without empathy, to study without remorse, and to manipulate reality itself. Couples caught in moments of tenderness and intimacy were transformed into targets. Simple gestures of love, laughter, shared music, quiet conversation became opportunities for control, intrusion, and erasure. Within this distorted consciousness, ordinary trust became a weaponized vulnerability, a doorway through which predation was enacted. Behavioral analysis shows the killer's violence carried symbolic intent rather than randomness. By targeting couples, they attacked intimacy, trust, and safety, core human bonds. Such choices may stem from unresolved conflicts, perhaps rooted in childhood trauma, neglect, or fractured relationships, creating a paradox of craving yet resenting connection. Deliberately staged objects, abandoned cars, arranged belongings, unexplained anomalies, function as psychological signatures, asserting dominance and control. Through absence itself, the predator left behind a chilling message of manipulation and power. Yet the impact of these crimes reaches far beyond the immediate victims. Families remain suspended in uncertainty, enduring a grief without closure. Memory becomes haunted not by what is known but by what is missing. For parents and siblings, the lack of finality inflicts chronic wounds, anxiety that never fades, hypervigilance that intrudes on daily life, and thoughts that resurface each anniversary. Communities, too, carry the imprint of fear. The parkway itself transformed into a symbolic landscape of unease, no longer a place of leisure but of caution. In collective consciousness, the road became a reminder of unpredictability, of how easily trust and routine can be subverted by unseen malice. Modern psychology reframes the killer not as pure horror, but as the outcome of environmental, emotional, and cognitive forces. Behavioral profiling from limited evidence reveals stressors, tendencies, and habits. Strategic use of secluded areas, patience in waiting, and adaptability point to a predator skilled in foresight and improvisation. Criminological concepts, psychopathy, compulsive predation, and spatial intelligence provide lenses that anchor seemingly inexplicable actions within identifiable psychological structures. Advances in forensic science have breathed new life into cold cases once thought beyond resolution. In the 1980s, DNA analysis was in its infancy. Today, even the smallest biological trace, hair, skin cells, residual fibers, can be examined with extraordinary precision. Forensic genealogy has emerged as a powerful tool, capable of identifying familial connections from minute fragments of genetic material. Evidence preserved from the original investigations may yet hold the key to identifying suspects who, at the time, seemed untouchable. Science has shifted the landscape, transforming absence into possibility and silence into potential revelation. In parallel, behavioral profiling has evolved into a more refined investigative instrument. By re-examining patterns of victim selection, timing, evidence manipulation, and geographic familiarity, modern profilers can generate offender models that narrow focus onto potential suspects. Unlike earlier eras, profiling is no longer an abstract speculation, but a data-informed methodology intersecting psychology, environment, and behavior. When cross-referenced with known individuals who frequented the Colonial Parkway during the critical years, such profiles may expose links long overlooked. The integration of forensic genealogy and contemporary profiling forms a dual strategy, one anchored in biological fact, the other in behavioral logic. DNA evidence can trace familial lines, or confirm the identities of missing victims, while psychological reconstruction contextualizes the choices and impulses of the offender. Together, they create a comprehensive approach, blending science and psychology into a framework that honors both evidence and empathy. For investigators, this is not only about identifying a suspect, but about restoring fractured narratives and acknowledging the weight carried by families and communities. Still, the aftershocks of the Colonial Parkway murders ripple across time. Families live with unanswered questions. Communities remain shaped by the residue of fear, their collective memory framed by absence. For the public, the case endures as both mystery and mirror, reflecting the limits of human comprehension when confronted with deliberate disappearance. Yet within the persistence of trauma lies the possibility of justice. Every new technological advancement, every reinterpretation of behavior, offers the hope of resolution. But hope is shadowed by questions. Does modern forensic power bring us closer to truth, or does it simply expose more of the darkness within human capacity? Each genetic lead, each reconstructed profile promises progress, but they also remind us of the fragility of safety and the ease with which trust can be broken. Even as science pushes boundaries, the emotional toll endures. Survivors and relatives remain tethered to uncertainty, their grief complicated by decades of silence and speculation. There are also ethical dimensions in revisiting these cold cases. Privacy, consent, and the psychological readiness of survivors must be weighed against the imperative for resolution. Familial DNA searches can illuminate connections, but also expose hidden truths families may not wish to confront. Yet many argue the potential gains, the restoration of identity to the missing, the possibility of justice, the validation of lives cut short, outweigh these dilemmas. To pursue the truth is to acknowledge the humanity of victims, to refuse their erasure. Ultimately, the Colonial Parkway murders compel reflection on the vulnerability of human connection. The predator's mind remains elusive, but the consequences of their actions are enduring. Broken families, altered communities, landscapes redefined by fear. At the same time, the convergence of technology and psychology offers a renewed path forward. Each clue, each anomaly, each fragment of memory is an invitation to re-examine the past, as though the silence itself is urging us toward illumination. If modern tools can recover traces long forgotten, perhaps we stand closer to a truth obscured for decades. And in seeking to understand the predator, we inevitably confront something within ourselves, the fragile boundaries of safety, trust, and intimacy. These are the questions that linger, echoing along the Colonial Parkway, where absence continues to speak louder than words, and silence remains the most haunting witness of all. The Colonial Parkway murders remind us that fear is not always loud. Sometimes it exists in quiet, persistent absence. The lingering uncertainty transforms ordinary landscapes into places of unease, and ordinary moments into fragile encounters. Communities, families, and individuals carry the invisible weight of unresolved trauma, learning that vigilance and empathy must coexist with curiosity and hope. These cases compel us to confront the hidden facets of human behavior and the subtle vulnerabilities in the spaces we inhabit. As technology and forensic science advance, the possibility of uncovering long-forgotten evidence grows, offering not only justice for the victims, but insight into the minds of those who hide in plain sight. Yet even with progress, we are left with profound questions. How do we reconcile human vulnerability with resilience? And how do we understand the darkness that can exist quietly alongside ordinary life? If you found this exploration compelling, don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to Criminal Mindcast for more analyses of unresolved cases and the shadows behind them. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession. Thank you for listening to Criminal Mindcast.
References 1. O'Neill, T. 2019. The Colonial Parkway Murders. New York, Random House. A chilling true crime account of unsolved couples' disappearances. Point 2. Smith, J. 2021. Cold Case Files, Unsolved Mysteries. Boston, Beacon Press. Explores haunting investigations, ignored evidence, and enduring community trauma.